actually working on setting up the stream. We're trying to see if we've gone live now on everywhere. So let me double check. We've been gone
Hello,
for
everyone.
about a week. So let me see. And let's see if this works real fast. Let's see if we're live on Substack yet. So
pressing the buttons.
let me double check.
I'm slamming the buttons like the
on
one
this
cat
one.
meme. Oh my gosh.
Sometimes I don't know if it likes this. Let me see. I'm going to try to fix it. We have a guest today, so it's fantastic. It's going to be awesome. It says we are live, so I hope so. Maybe, probably. I know we're live on YouTube, so we shall see. Did it go live? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Okay, I don't care. All right, so it says we are live, so I don't know if we're live. Let me double check. This is. Let me see if it works real fast. Guys, give me a second. I'm still learning this fantastic software. So before I introduce our guest, I'm going to try to get this fixed. How you been, Fisto? How's it going?
Oh, I've been fine. School started this week, so that's been a lot of fun. Absolutely awesome to get back. I was called for jury duty this week too, so I had to miss a day for that. I don't know if you saw my note, but I was not selected. And I'm choosing to believe my own personal canon is that it's because I have principles and I won't uphold stupid laws. But it actually ended up being very interesting. Well, I got caught by the question about essentially trying to weed out jury nullifiers, according to some of the more legally minded folks on Substack, which that hadn't occurred to me until well after the fact. But essentially, they were the prosecution. So if you've never been called for jury duty, at least down here in Florida, there's a whole process where they're trying to weed out people, or they're trying to decide who they want to put on the jury. And one of the questions that was asked was essentially they were asking, would you be able to serve on a jury if the laws in question, if you felt that the laws in question were stupid? And they picked like a purposefully ridiculous law as like a purely hypothetical ridiculous thing, and everybody in the room agreed it was stupid. And the prosecutor themselves agreed that it was stupid. The vast majority of the people in the room said that they would be able to convict. And I was the only person in the room to say I would be capable of convicting, but I would choose not to because the law is, as you say, stupid.
So that's the jury nullification thing, right?
Yeah. And I didn't even realize jury nullification could be that big of a deal, because at the end of the day, the court, the jury, they have actual power. You can't come after them if you don't like what they decided. It's shut the fuck up, retard, deal with it. Nothing can be done about that. So, someone could lie, get on the jury, sabotage the whole process, and it's sacrosanct. Deal with it. Tough poopies. So that was an interesting experience. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an authentic. I try to be authentic.
Okay, that's like I've never been called up for jury duty. Okay, so I've never done that. I've never experienced it. I've never. The reason one is I wasn't a U.S. citizen until recently.
That'll do it.
Years
that'll
ago.
do it.
But then I was in the military most of the time, so I kind of missed it. All right, can you guys hear me? Do I sound good?
Yeah, you sound great. You sound beautiful as always. Oh, and it looks like we're live on Substack. Hell yeah.
Okay, it looks like we're live. All right, we're live, man. I think we're good.
Yeah, people are joining.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
All right. Give me one more second. I'm trying to fix this, guys. I am a complete failure today. But yeah, I've never been able to do it, right? Because I've wasn't a U.S. citizen when I was young, and then as I became older, I was in the military, and I've never gotten any ever since. I've never gotten it since. So
yeah, I think population has a lot to do with it too. This I did not realize, but apparently in where I live, it's a rural county, so the population is not large. And people, I mean, I was talking to people, they've been picked 5-6 times over the course of their lifetime. So it's probably something I'll get called for again in the future, only because the pool of available people is so low, and I don't know how many people they summon but certainly quite a few of them did not show. We only had about 50 plus that showed up.
I don't think my wife's ever been called either, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, you
All
live in a
right.
much higher population area too, right?
That's true. That's true. I don't know. They
Yeah.
probably
No,
don't get
mine
called
is. Yeah. There's nobody out here, man. Like,
Yeah, they don't
relatively
call white
speaking.
people to Los Angeles jury duty. Probably they're like, nope. All right. So hey guys, we're back. I apologize for the choppy start because I just couldn't get the streaming thing to work. But I want to be live on Substack. It's easy to be live on YouTube, but it's kind of a difficulty to be live on Substack because it doesn't really. Substack is just not a great app, and it doesn't really support live streaming.
Fix your shit, Substack. Fix your shit.
Yeah, hopefully they will eventually. The bigger they get, they probably will. But
Yeah.
we've been gone for a week, and it feels like forever. I feel like we've really just been gone 1 week, but I feel like we had a summer-long vacation, mostly because this week has been so busy. Like you starting school, my daughter starting school at a new school, so it's just my schedule has been all over the place, and going to church, and just a lot of changes. So today we have a guest I've been looking forward to for a while, which I say about every guest, but this one I actually mean it. Sorry, previous guys. So we have Karis Rides. Karis Rides is actually one of my newer favorite reads on Substack right now. And who is she? She's a writer, former academic or retired academic, right? Who's currently a stay-at-home mom, a former evangelical Christian that's turned Orthodox, and she writes some of the most interesting stuff on Substack. So I highly recommend you check out her essays. Welcome to the Black Ibis Social Club, Karis.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, I've been really excited to have you. I was rereading all your stuff the other day, and I gotta say, like I think the first essay I read of yours that I came across was your let me see your Return of the Pagans one. I really like that one. I think that's what jumped on me, and that's kind of been a topic on our kind of Substackistanian discourse lately. But I'm gonna probably mention that, so guys prepare yourselves for that. You guys in the chat, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about that for a bit. I know how much everybody's so excited to discuss that. But before we start, actually, you are an academic. You're a former evangelical that converted to Orthodoxy. You want to tell us a bit about yourself, a quick self-introduction?
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm a former academic. I, like many, left academia when it was getting pretty insane. I entered grad school right when the riots in Ferguson occurred and Black Lives Matter took off. So I think I would say maybe 2 weeks into my grad program at Emory University in Atlanta, which is a very liberal university. I walked out onto the quad and noticed there were all these people laying down side to side to side, blocking, and you couldn't move. And that was the first moment of me realizing, oh, okay, so we're not in Kansas anymore. Things have changed. And I was at Emory getting my master's in historical theological studies. Emory didn't have a separate grad program for people who just wanted to do the academic side of religion. So you had to be part of the seminary. So I was technically in seminary, which was one of the most harrowing experiences of my life. But I did receive my master's from them. I focused on Pauline Christianity, early Christianity, ancient Mediterranean religions. I had gotten my bachelor's previously at Georgia State and had done my work on the origins of original sin in Western Christianity. And that had gotten me a little bit of attention, and people said, oh, okay, so this is kind of some interesting work. And it was while I was doing my work on original sin that I came across orthodoxy. And I was kind of deconstructing from evangelicalism, even though I didn't know it at the time. My parents had become Anglican when I was in high school, and I had gone to college really excited to find some sort of campus ministry. I tried Campus Crusade, Young Life, house churches. I did everything. And I just felt like I was wading into pools of shallow water. And I'd want to talk about scripture. I'd want to talk about, what do you think Paul means when he says this? And people were a lot more interested in getting laid, finding a spouse as soon as possible in order to get laid. And I mean, sadly, it's true. And just kind of like the social aspect of finding your group. And so I just found myself increasingly not going to anything until my roommate, who was Catholic, invited me to Mass. And I started going to Mass with her. I enjoyed it. And I didn't start attending regularly, but it had whetted my appetite enough that I thought, this is kind of interesting. And it is like my parents, when they go to the Anglican service. And I did a project on sound and religion. And I got, excuse me, one moment. Sorry, Mama, sweetheart, you need to go down.
No worries. It's interesting, Fista. We're turning into the Orthodox Substack podcast.
That's fine with me. It's actually interesting. I can't wait to mention it to Karis when she gets back. But
I apologize. That was my 4-year-old daughter.
You're good. Kids are amazing. It's great to have kids interrupt a podcast like that. That's cool, man. Don't worry about it.
It's better than my dogs.
Yeah, right. It's better than the shit I say. So it's whatever. No, but it's just.
Yeah, no,
I can't wait
please.
to hear you continue. Yeah, I can't wait to hear you continue. But I was laughing because when you're talking about Young Life and Campus Crusade, what's up? I'm a fellow alum, and the whole like get married to get laid and like I'm just like, God, ancient memories triggered.
I know. It was.
But anyway.
No, it was that exact same for me. And as you can probably guess, I wasn't. I was a little intimidating for a lot of the. I mean, men and women in the groups, but men especially. They would not touch me with a 10-foot pole once I opened my mouth. So, but yeah, I was doing a project my junior year at university on religion and sound, and I don't even know why, but I thought, I've come across Orthodoxy. I don't know anything about it. I think I'm going to study chant. And I reached out to a beautiful parish nearby, and I just emailed the priest. I asked if I could come, and he said, yes, of course. And he was really warm, really welcoming. And I went to a service and I was crying, and I was very touched, and I just started reading and reading and reading. And I reached out to him and I said, I'm kind of interested. Is there a way to become Orthodox? Like, I'm already a Christian, but I think I want to officially join. And I went down that rabbit hole of catechesis, and I was chrismated in, was it May 2014, right around my senior year of college. And at the time I got a lot of pushback, even though my parents weren't really in the non-denominational world anymore. They had been deep in it. My father had he had spoken at a John Eldridge retreat. That's how deep if you guys are familiar with Wild at Heart and John Eldridge and that kind of non-denominational world, he was deep in that.
No.
Yeah, he was deep in that. A lot of, I would say, kind of like really hyper grace-oriented evangelicalism for people coming from fundamentalist backgrounds.
That's right. You know what? It's ringing a bell. I think I might have attended one of those. I think I might have attended a retreat of theirs, or something in that realm, something similar. But yeah, that was the milieu my parents had been in. They actually had moved us to Atlanta in '95 to join a restorationist cult that did not work out well. What fun.
It was a lot of fun. it very quickly led to infidelity and abuse and power struggles, as is often the case.
What?
But
That's so shocking.
yeah, I know, it was shocking. It was really shocking how that completely blew up. But yeah, that was the world that I grew up in. My dad had grown up in an independent fundamentalist Baptist community, basically like Footloose on steroids. No dancing, no secular music, no movies. Everything's evil. You're, doomed for hell. And he had rejected that and had become a Christian again in the military when he met a guy who presented a different sort of gospel to him. But yeah, they were hardcore evangelicals, and our friends were hardcore evangelicals. And people just asked me, they said, why? What is like, how could you go to a law-based form? How could you go to a dead tradition? And I just shrugged my shoulders and said, I think y'all might be missing out. And that was 11 years ago. And now I feel like I'm starting to see a lot of other people wake up and realize, oh, like these apostolic traditional forms of Christianity might endure for a reason. So
Right. But
yeah.
Well, that's a fascinating story. I don't want to say that it's an original story because it's not. I think that you can take, I would say, 50% of the people that come to my church and have a very similar story. I'm also in the South. I'm in South Carolina, and a lot of I would say a good 50 to 60% of our church is former Protestant that has very similar to your story. They're all Southerners. They're involved in some kind of a Baptist restorational, charismatic type of thing going on, and they kind of had a falling out, or they kind of fell away from it, didn't feel fulfilled, and then they discovered the Orthodox Church. The other about 40% are former like Roman Catholics, and then we have a bunch of like atheist, non-denominational types, and then us like small percentage that is the kind of cradle Orthodox crowd, which we're pretty small, I think. It's very interesting, and it's for me, somebody that was born into the Orthodox Church in Eastern Europe, and it was just kind of like there. It was like the thing you kind of do. You don't really like. I never really thought about it until I became much older, and it wasn't until much more recently that I started becoming very serious about, returning to the church and going to. And I find it so fascinating that there's so many Americans that have the same exact story you do. And it's exploding right now. I feel like every Sunday and every, gathering or meeting we have, we discuss the explosion of people coming to our church. I mean, our small church that started off as a mission with like 10 people 10 years ago, we're outgrowing our temporary building we were using until our church is built, and the parish is panicking, like, where are we going to put all these people? And then we're going to build. We started the process of building a church, but the plans we're using are probably going to be too small for the people that just showed up in the last like 6 months. So it's a wonderful blessing to have all these people in having all this interest, which of course brings a lot of problems, and a lot of discussions and debate. I know right now, at least in the OCA, I don't know what branch of Orthodoxy your church is. If you,
I go to a Greek, a Greek church.
Okay, you go to a Greek church. Mm-hmm. The OCA is like growing a lot, and they had a kind of like a meeting of bishops and stuff in Arizona recently, and I guess a lot of the topics were how do we deal with all these online people with all this interest, and how do we and a lot of people come to the Orthodox Church and they're confused by it, and I'm not talking just about the theological kind of elements, but they're confused about well, why don't you guys go out there and advertise? Why don't you guys go out and do outreaches? And most Orthodox churches are like, no, that's cool, man. We don't need to do that. We'll just do what we do. And if people will walk in, they'll walk in. If people don't walk in, then they don't, you know? And that's such a different mindset for a lot of people that come from Protestant backgrounds where they're constantly, you know, evangelizing and stuff. But yeah, fascinating. Fisto, I don't know. Is that my microphone or whose?
No, that was mine. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's okay. Fisto recently started going to an Orthodox church himself, and you know, he comes from a mixed Protestant Roman Catholic background. I don't really have a Protestant background. I've had friends and I've gone to Protestant churches. I've gone to a Baptist church a few times, but I don't really have like a deep understanding of Protestantism besides its very surface, like inquiring level. In the same way, I don't really have a deep understanding of the Roman Catholic Church besides, you know, reading history books and having a few friends. But I fully understand that America is like, you know, seeped in Protestantism. And I find your commentary on that very, very interesting. Now, what do you think? So we live in an age right now, in an era where we're coming off the end of the atheist era, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the 2000s, and I'm going to guess you're probably around our age, so we probably shared similar experiences. In the 2000s, anybody can tell you that, you know, the Protestants, your winsome, in and out, you know, Bible verse, you know, stamped on the back of their trucks kind of guys, and what was it, not of this world Christians and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys went toe to toe with the new atheists, the Reddit atheists, and honestly, they lost. Right? They got their butts kicked. Right? In the sphere of like cultural perception. Right? What's his name, Christopher Hitchens, and what's his name, the British guy. You know, those guys won. Right? Yeah, Dawkins. I mean, as much as we make fun of the Reddit atheists now, and that meme destroyed them more than anything, right? But we make fun of these guys. Realistically speaking, in the overall cultural perspective, the Mr. Flanders Christianity got its ass kicked. All right, let's just stop being cool. The powers that be managed to align Christianity in America with either negative, low class, like, you know, poor white trash, like sensibility, unfortunately, you know, stuff like Honey Boo Boo and that kind of like a negative perception, or with Mr. Flanders, the whole winsome thing, and Simpsons just really did a number on him, and it became passe. I remember, and I don't know, Fisto and Karis, you can agree or disagree. I'm actually curious. When I grew up in I graduated high school 2002, and I was in college right after that. So when I was growing up around that era, I was kind of into the whole atheist thing. I had my atheist moment, let's say, and I was really big into like Hitchens and stuff. But I remember that and this is in Southern California, in one of the most liberal, progressive places in the world. I was still in a minority. You know, if I would make some, Christopher Hitchens like quip, I'd have a bunch of people like down my throat instantly go, no, you're evil. You're an evil atheist and that kind of stuff. And somewhere around the 2000s, there was a total switch where all of a sudden I got to the point where, like, I'm just defending Christianity now after being an atheist, because I hated the way, the kind of like the common man kind of adopted that atheist mindset, and it became just not as interesting and not as cool for me too, which kind of tells me a lot about my personal non-belief, but we'll leave it at that. But did you guys have that experience a lot? Did you grow up where it was cool to be a Christian, or was it a Christian majority, or was it mostly kind of like atheists?
I think at least for me in the South, I do remember the 90s and early 2000s seemed to be like kind of this peak in what I'd call like the Christian culture, when a lot of evangelicals tried to adopt forms of popular culture and just put Jesus on them. And that really peaked. And then it seemed like the new atheism came in and, like, to your point, destroyed it. And I mean, ironically, the first college I went to before I transferred to Georgia State was where Honey Boo Boo lived. So when you made the honey, I mean, that's like exact. I went to, middle of nowhere, Georgia, where it's just, we eat our barbecue and we love Jesus, but there wasn't any rigor. And I don't think anybody was trying to even go up against the atheists because they knew they couldn't. I never dipped my toes into atheism, but I definitely flirted a little bit with agnostics and kind of some of the pantheists. And to my great shame, I remember going to a shop one day and seeing like a coexist sticker and thinking, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? And now I look back, I'm like, oh geez, like, but I mean, yeah, by the time I graduated high school in 2010, Christianity was, you're like, oh, that's for rubes. That's for people who aren't very intelligent, aren't very intellectual. And I would try to defend my beliefs in college and found myself realizing that, yeah, it's kind of hard to defend what I believe. And I'm not sure I even like what I was raised in. And I'm not sure I agree with it anymore. So yeah, that was definitely part of my experience.
Right. And then you said you're in Atlanta area, so that's the South.
Yes.
So that's really interesting that the South has always been known as the much more religious part of the United States. So the fact that like that was kind of the mindset even in the South, 20 years ago or 10, 15 years ago, that's very interesting because I said I grew up in Southern California and we tended to be ahead of the curve when it comes to all bad things in the world. So,
intellectually ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah, we're winning that downhill race when it comes to the bottom, right? So it's between us and New York. We can't really decide who gets there first, So, but yeah, I mean, I know some listeners are California guys, and I don't know if Dave Green is still in the chat or he's still listening. He often talks, a great podcaster, one of my favorite podcasters and YouTubers. And he always talks about, I believe, if I remember correctly, he grew up in Northern California and he's about my age too. And it's the same kind of thing where by the time, you're in college in our generation, it was absolutely passé to be like a Protestant Christian. Like as soon as you said Protestant Christian, like, okay. I mean, I guess you guys had Tooth and Nail records and those bands and stuff, which were pretty cool. I mean, I'm going to say there's a few bands that are on Tooth and Nail or were on Tooth and Nail. I don't know that they're still around, but for the most part, you think of Protestant Christians, you think of Mr. Flanders and like Creed. Nobody likes Creed. I'm sorry.
No, I don't even think Creed likes Creed.
Okay, I know one person that likes Creed. My buddy Angel decided to go to see Creed the other day in Charleston.
Well, he's clearly got brain damage, so he doesn't actually like Creed.
From a previous Creed concert.
Right. Yeah. And he's 21. He's a freaking Gen Zer. And they're all into Creed. All the Gen Zers are into like Limp Bizkit now. So
yeah,
it's even worse.
What is this now? This is incorrect.
It's
I teach Zoomers, so I'm gonna have to just hammer this out of them.
You're gonna have your Zoomer kids with their freaking like red caps with New York on them and all Fred Dursting. I mean, even like the new Battlefield 6 or whatever used Limp Bizkit as a background music for their trailer. So it's going to be all over. It's going to be all over soon.
Listen, these kids don't know. Back in my day, you had Halo 2 with Breaking Benjamin. Okay, that's the old school uphill both ways in the snow. All right, I don't want to hear it. Fucking Limp Bizkit. Battlefield.
One thing one observation I've made for a lot of former Protestants that have come to Orthodoxy, what I've noticed is that the majority of them, yes, Ogre, Limp Bizkit, dude, it's all over the place, right? But my wife, I don't know if she's listening right now, she actually has a T-shirt that's kind of it's a joke T-shirt, but it says love life Limp Bizkit. It makes fun of that, love whatever, but it says that. And that's she actually wore it to church, not church, but like a church event one time. And our priest, our father, he's also of this generation, and he thinks it's hilarious because we always make fun of her music taste. You know, my wife is a diehard Limp Bizkit fan, or no, she's not, but she'll tell you she's just to be irritating. You know, she's down with the Sickness or with Korn or whatever those guys are. But you know, one interesting thing I noticed about the Protestant converts is that you guys tend to be not the, oh well, I needed something or I wanted some feeling or anything. You guys tend to be the most intellectual kind of inquirers I've come across. Like I've noticed that, first of all, for example, our priest at our church, Father James, he is a former Protestant who also is from Georgia and the Atlanta area and was a hardcore kind of like part of that Protestant kind of world in the 90s, and you know, did the whole Tooth and Nail Records kind of stuff, and you know, even played in a Christian band, a pretty famous one. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but and you know, it tends to be that most people are very intellectual that have come over from the Protestant side, and it wasn't like, oh, I needed something, or like I needed like some you know, some like affirmations. No, it's always like, I just wanted more depth. I wanted more. I wanted to read more. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to, like, you know, and every single one of the people from the Protestant side seems to be like this. They tend to be the most interesting people. I go to our catechumen classes because my wife is recently converted to Orthodoxy. And so I go with her because our priest asked me to, so I can help her out and stuff. And yeah, the most interesting questions and stuff are from the Protestant side, and I find it very interesting. I've noticed our Roman Catholic converts are also very intelligent, but they're there for a different reason. Almost, they're like, they understand a lot of the stuff in Orthodoxy. They're here more because of disagreements with the Roman Catholic Church, or a lack of fullness in the Roman Catholic Church, but never so much this like constant intellectual need, because they can get the same from the Roman Catholic Church. It's just, we're meeting a different need for them, if that makes sense, right? Would you say about the same thing from your experience with I'm sure you know plenty of converts.
I do, actually. My parish is about 75% converts, and my priest is also, he was a charismatic Pentecostal preacher, and he was actually joking in Divine Liturgy the other week about how he had dreamed of being a televangelist, and now he's a priest of our parish, which is growing astronomically. We're actually building a new church because we can't fit people, and we're running out of room, and it's the same issue of, I think a lot of it is because for intellectually curious, engaged Protestants, you are really pushed to read the Bible cover to cover, ask questions. You know, we're told that that's the source of everything, and you need to go there. If you have questions, if you're wondering about something, you need to pray over it and ask God to show you what's in it. And we have Bible studies, right? Bible studies are huge in non-denominational circles. And so if you're rigorous, if you're curious, if you are an intellectual, you're putting your head in the Bible all the time. And then you're coming across all these seemingly contradictions. Like, wait a second. Well, that doesn't seem to line up with that verse. And why are things different in this book than that book? And at least I can speak for myself. I was always asking questions. My father was an intellectual, and my father had fostered that in me. That was part of the reason he ended up going to Anglicanism. He wanted to become Catholic, but my mom was not ready for that. And I tried to persuade him to go to the route of Orthodoxy, but he said that he was just too Western. But I was raised by an intellectual who, the house was covered in books, was always told, ask questions. What do you think? And, 10 years old, I'm reading Revelation. I'm like, what's going on here? There's a lot of what does this mean? What does that mean? And you can only ask that so many times before people say, I don't know, or they can't really describe to you what's going on at the time that Paul is writing his epistles, or what's going on at the time of, Babylonian captivity. And I think for several Protestants, you're allowed maybe like one church father to really look at, and that's St. Augustine. And you
I was going to say C.S. Lewis, that was the one you were allowed to look at.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a joke there, of course. Yeah,
yeah, you're right. I mean, which is hilarious because he was high church Anglican, and not a non-denominational guy, but yeah, I mean, C.S. Lewis really, he's the height of intellectual rigor.
Yeah.
And
J.R.R. Tolkien, he's one of the Protestant church fathers too, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of Lord of the Rings. I got most of my theology from Lord of the Rings for the first half of my life.
Mel Gibson had that one movie. He had that one movie too. I think that makes him that one too.
Mel Gibson's the one Catholic you're allowed to read from, or
yes.
But yeah, I mean, because you just keep running into the point where you want to know why is the Gospel of John written the way it is? Why is the Gospel of Matthew written the way it is? Why are they different? What are they trying? What are the different themes and messages they're trying to share? And for me, I studied Latin, I studied Greek. I started reading the text in the original format with ancient Mediterranean scholars, and it just started poking all these holes in my Protestant mind of what? That doesn't make, this means completely different things than what I've been told. And I started to realize that my whole life I'd been told to read the Bible from the perspective of a 21st century American. And you're going to reach limitations when you do that. And in my experience.
Right. Absolutely. And, during my flirtation with Protestantism, I would come across that kind of stuff too, where I wanted to read as much as possible. And it's just, you couldn't find anything that wasn't some kind of a, minister's opinions that sold at Barnes and Noble. And it's just like kind of live life, Limp Biscuit in a way when it comes to depth. And I'm like, well, where's the deep stuff where, I want to really know, I want to get into the historical stuff. And there's a lot of hand waving. We're like, well, I don't want to talk about that, or, that kind of stuff, and I'm not talking about, when I did, like I said, kind of spend some time in a Protestant church. I didn't go to some like Boduk tent revival place in like Alabama or something like that. Like I went to a big, wealthy church that was connected to Biola University in Southern California. And so these guys weren't morons. They were educated, but there was just a lack of depth there. And they had to, intellectually kind of ignore everything, which is very interesting because almost everybody I knew that went to that church, has stopped going. They're not, including the one of the pastors himself. He just kind of has given up on Christ and on religion. So it's not just an us problem. It's an everybody problem when it comes to them. But I find that very interesting. So, we're having this kind of, I would say, interesting enough, like we were having this conversation at church on Sunday. And one thing I've noticed, and I hope nobody takes offense, right? Because I'm not, in the Orthodox Church, and I'm not saying the church itself, but in like the circles of people and the overall online presence and stuff, we're having a lot of debates for now. The whole Ortho Bro debate, which I don't find it very fair. For you guys that are listening, you might not know what Ortho Bros is. It refers to the very kind of loud and aggressive online Orthodox presence. And I would have to say that, first of all, you got to take everything with a grain of salt, right? Because, or is it grain of sand or salt? How do you,
Grain of salt. Grain of salt.
Give me a break, guys.
Grain of frankincense. Let's try to.
Okay, with a grain of frankincense, right, and myrrh, because we don't know when you're dealing with somebody online, right? You don't know what they really believe, right? It's not like you don't know who they really are. You don't know anything about them unless they have a large body of work, like, for example, Karis or myself. And, I'm not really an anonymous person. You guys can find me. If you really want to work hard, you could probably find exactly where I live, and, I'll have to kill you. That's how it works, right? But a lot of these people, especially on Substack, we've had it a few times where I had to go off on somebody. They are not speaking officially for the church, right? The Orthodox Church, whether it's the OCA, which is the Orthodox Church in America, or the Greek Orthodox, they don't put proclamations and debate things on the internet, on Substack and Twitter, guys. Okay. It just doesn't. All right. They do often post videos and they'll post homilies and that kind of thing, but they're not going to sit here and get into debates on the internet. So there's a lot of young people that are filled with like a fervor of discovering orthodoxy, or you do have this on the Roman Catholic side, but it seems to have died out with the what do you call it? That kind of like the Templar posting that's kind of sort of died out recently, right?
Yeah.
They've died out, I think, ever since the new pope, and it's been kind of more mellow now. But a lot of those guys moved over to Orthodoxy, right? And it is a problem. On one point, we want fervorous joy of joining the church, right? We want those people to be there, but at the same time, it takes time to truly understand something as ancient and as difficult as the Orthodox Church and, worshiping Christ. And what a lot of these people misunderstand, and this is the same problem. I have the same critique about the pagans, right? A lot of people that are kind of lost in today's world, they're not looking for religion. So they're basically, okay, let me rephrase that. Believing in Christ is really the first step, okay? Because ultimately, the devil believes in Christ, all right? The devil believes that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, all right? It's like we know that. The devil knows that. Demons know that. The devil's, everybody, all the bad things know that, right? There's more to that, all right? You got to live it. You got to participate, right? Orthodoxy is about participation. It's about love and participation, and reading deep theology, writing homilies and theological screeds sometimes is less important than the old babushka who bakes the bread for Sunday, all right?
Yeah.
And you don't know that if you're online. Being online is not being member of the church, guys. Okay. So it's very important, right? And Orthodoxy is not a t-shirt you wear. It's not like, I'm going to put on a class shirt and I'm going to, now I'm a punk rocker, or I'm going to put black lipstick on, white face paint, and I'm a goth, or I'm going to put on clown makeup and I'm Fisto. It's just not, it's not how it works, right? It's about being part of the church, being part of the body of the church, going every Sunday, taking part in communion, being a member of the church, going to Vespers, going to the vigils, living the life, fully integrating your life and your secular calendar of your life with the liturgical calendar of the church. All of us right now that are talking, all three of us, we should be doing we're getting close to the end of our Dermission fast, right? And I'm telling you, I am feeling it. Okay. I have not eaten meat in almost 2 weeks, or cheese or eggs, and I am not happy. The first week was easy. The second week, it's been getting me. I'm like, but it's here to teach me something, right? It's an everyday living occurrence. We have our prayer rules where we try our best to pray in the morning or whatever works for us, whatever we can fit into our lives. But we're not going to a religion that matches our political and cultural ideas. Okay. We're not looking for that, right? Orthodoxy is not that. It is, we are changing ourselves for the church and for Christ, not the other way around. All right. The church is the path. And, I think in the Orthodox way, which is kind of like the introductory book to, Orthodoxy that everybody gets recommended, Father Callisto's War, where I always say his name wrong. I'm sorry. He quotes an old church father and says that, you can't just study the plans of a city or the map of a city, right? You have to actually, in order to know the city, you have to walk its streets. You have to go in its nooks and crannies, alleys, and everything, right? And that's what matters, right? So I can tell you about Orthodoxy from now until eternity, right? I can even convince you, but you're never going to really get it until you go to liturgy, right? Would you say that's true, Fisto? Because you recently started going. Would you say that?
Yeah.
It's just something there.
It's the thing that's in my mind, and I have a similar kind of story to Karis, though. I missed a lot of the new atheist stuff because I was busy working, I was busy living, I was busy doing my existence, right? I didn't, and I just didn't hang out in that. Well, whatever, man. I was busy getting laid. I was busy working. I was busy going out, and I was traveling around and doing all kinds of crazy shit. And when it comes to being online, arguing about atheism and arguing about Christianity, there was just something deeply unappealing about that. The only atheist writer, if you can even call him that I even really got into was Carl Sagan. And that's only because he was more interested talking about science and he didn't want to. I mean, if you guys have read Contact, there's this really interesting scene in the book where he goes into some depth about faith and the nature of God. And I really believe at the end of the book, he kind of winks at you and goes, "Wait a second, Carl, you son of a bitch." He's not a Richard Dawkins dick atheist. You know what I mean? So I was really appealed to that because he did allow for the fact that I don't understand everything about the cosmos. So it's just, whatever. But anyway, so that was about as far as I got into that because I was just busy. And hearing you guys talk about it and the Orthobro stuff and a lot of the conversation I see on Substack, talking about Christianity and talking about the faith is good. And just being normal people talking about it, that's great. The school I go to, since I've gone back to church and specifically an Orthodox church, I reached out to the other Christians on campus. I'm going to go to, the prayer stuff. I have a couple of kids who asked me about church last year, and I was really excited to tell one of them today, hey, I want to tell you about the church I started attending. And I blew her mind when I said that. That's walking the streets, right, Alex? That's getting to know the city, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Bitching on Substack about obscure theological points. Shut up, retard. I don't care. Okay. Right. I get that can be interesting and there might be some value in there, but man, some of the way people go at each other, dude, even the disciples didn't bitch at each other like this. And those guys were a bunch of, my God. Right. So
Paul probably did. Paul was probably.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Paul's got that. Yeah, Paul's got that BDE Paul. All right, just swinging that thing. And I get it. That's Paul, man. All right, by all means, sir, carry on. But I mean, Paul was essentially yelling at everybody, "Shut up, retard." I mean, is that essentially Paul? But anyway, my whole point though is that I agree. A lot of this stuff is not useful. It's not helpful, and you're wasting your goddamn time. All right, just go live life, go do the thing. When I got to the Orthodox church, listen, can I take a moment, kind of share my own story here?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so I'm baptized Catholic, right? And God bless my mom and dad. They only did it because my grandmother insisted. That's what you do. You baptize the kid in the church, okay? You go down to St. Pat's and you baptize the kid, okay? I mean, it's Cleveland Irish folks, you know what I mean? Irish immigrants living in Cleveland. You go baptize the boy. Come on, let's go. So that was about it. By about middle school, we stopped attending Catholic church, and I still don't to this day know why we stopped going. My parents got bored, I guess, and I didn't know how to drive yet, so whatever. but later on, in high school, I got involved with Young Life. I had that whole evangelical Christian, experience. I went to a small Lutheran school in Ohio. Got linked up with Campus Crusade and Vineyard and all that stuff, and I just straight up had that Protestant burnout. Right? It was just I was tired. I was just tired of going and putting on the same song and dance every week. And I was playing in the church band, like I was literally doing the song and dance every week, and it was just, man, I don't want to go. I'm tired, and that's really what it was. 20 years later, I'm on my prodigal walkabout. I claimed myself as atheist, but looking back recently, since I've gotten back to church and attending the Orthodox Church, I wasn't rejecting God. I was rejecting Protestantism. Just that whole performance treadmill and treating faith and treating spirituality and treating theology like it's my favorite fast food burger. Just forget it. Just no. So when I was thinking about going back to church, when the thought occurred to me, I wanted to go somewhere that was quiet and that was telling me, shut up, retard. That's what I wanted. That is what I desperately wanted, was just be quiet, shut up, don't say anything, be in the presence of God and take your medicine. All right. That's what I wanted. I mean, dude, I'll go into a Catholic church. I'll go into an Orthodox church. I'll just sit there. That's all I want, So going to liturgy, it's serious, right? It demands me just, that prayer that I post every Sunday now. God have mercy on me, a sinner, for I'm evil and retarded. Amen. That is my extent. That is the extent of my contribution to the discourse on the subject, because that's it. That's all I care about. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Because at the end of the day, you got the God of the freaking universe. You've got God becoming man. He comes back from the dead, guys. The tomb is empty. The one guy, it only takes one dude in history to come back from the grave, and everything's different. Like, there is nothing else to be said, right? In my mind. And the Holy Spirit and everything else. Beyond that, it's okay. It's useful. It's good. We can talk about that stuff. But at least where I'm at, I just don't give a shit at the end of the day. I just want to go to church.
That's true.
And worship, and that's it. That's where I'm at. And it's probably because, listen, you got to talk like the intellectual side of it, things of that nature. I'm only getting excited about it because at the end of the day, I have this deep reprogramming that needs to occur. That regeneration you guys talk about, I realize, oh my God, I don't know anything. I'm starting over from scratch. All right, fine. I mean, that's what I've been doing my whole life. Like I've become an expert at doing things I've never done before. And I'm realizing that when it comes to God and spirituality, like and Christianity, I don't know anything. So, okay, well, I'll just start at the beginning, and I'll do this for the rest of my life. And then when I die, it means I get a break until, God does what he promised, and then I'll continue. Yeah, that's as far as I get.
Right.
So anyway,
and we don't want to turn away the guys that are filled with like online fervor, right? We want those guys. We want those guys because we understand, right? We want you to come. I think we just need to tell them, hey man, you got to come. You got to come on Sunday. Okay.
Relax.
It's not, it's not just about arguing theology, it's not a t-shirt. You got to come and you got to do the thing. Right. And what I mean by do the thing, that's my father, our priest saying. He's like, you got to do the thing, man. He's like, you got to come on Sunday. You got to venerate the icons. You got to light some candles, and you got to do some singing, and you got to do it.
Christianity has to be something that you do. It's not something that you are.
Right.
You can't be. I mean, you can be crashing. No, you have to do it too. There are things you must do, like in the world. Not with a computer, not with a cell phone. You have to physically move your ass to church and go do the churchy stuff. And you have to be in your community. You have to walk the city. That's such a great analogy, man. I love that. I'm going to use that. Yeah, because I instantly think of Constantinople at its height, and it's like you have to walk the city. You have to walk the city. You have to get to know the city of God.
Right, and it gets lost. I mean, I'm going to move on from this topic, right? But I wanted to kind of tell you a quick analogy story. So a lot of listeners are probably nerds. I know you guys. I know you guys. You guys are nerds. You guys are video game players and like tabletop role players. Okay. Now, I'm not a nerd. I was cool growing up, right? Like, I was basically like just a cool guy, but I did role play. My friends and I were like, we rolled the dice. All right. Even though, I'm just joking,
Nice.
but we always like, play Dungeons and Dragons and stuff when we were like in elementary school, middle school. And, my brother and I and all our like nearby friends, we'd play long campaigns and stuff and just, geek out for, days and days and weeks. I think one summer we never left the house. We just like played like this super long Dungeons and Dragons game that lasted from like June to August. And one day I walked out in the sun and like I was like, oh gosh, I should probably have gone out this summer. But I didn't really think much about it. It was just kind of something we did for fun. Many years later, I'm on the internet and, kind of like maybe 5-6 years ago, and I noticed that there's an entire community of people that are like arguing about like board game rules and like the rules of Dungeons and Dragons and how you should play and all this stuff. And I'm like, why are you arguing about that? Just go play, we never argued about rules and stuff. And then it dawned on me a little bit later, like reading this kind of like stuff, is that none of these dudes actually play. They just argue about the rules of this game,
Right.
And it's like, no. What was fun about playing Dungeons and Dragons, guys, was spending time with my brother and my buddy Zach, who I'm still friends with after 40 something years of knowing him, and my friend Philip and Sarah and all my friends, like that's what matters. Like I don't care about the rules of like casting magic missile or like how many like goblins I can carry in my backpack or whatever. None of that stuff matters, and none of that stuff mattered then. It was like, sitting around the table, or really we used to play on the floor when we were kids, like just have everything like lined up on the floor and pillows and stuff. That's what was fun. It was the participation. It was doing something with my friends, right? It wasn't about the rules and like the most powerful mage and all this stuff. No, that stuff is tertiary at best, right? What mattered was doing something you love with your friends. And it feels like the religious conversations online kind of take the same tack, where people are arguing about like rules and stuff, and you're missing the point, right? That stuff's important. That stuff is important, but what's more important is you going and doing the thing, really taking part of the community. All right, so I want those guys to come join us. All right, I want them to come join us. I want them to come on Sunday, but just. It's not a job. It's not a band you're following. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think the Dungeons and Dragons analogy actually is really good, because I'm going to try and, the Ortho Bros are the Ortho Bros, and they just you need to go to Divine Liturgy. You need to pray. You have to start living it. It really does take years and years. I think any mature Christian will tell you, before you even start seeing, like, it's awful, because you get excited.
Can I interrupt real quick? I just had the funniest thought. Ortho Bros, terminally online Ortho Bros, guys, you need to go to church in much the same way that the atheist guys need to get laid.
Yes, it's a similar. Right, you need some incarnational kind of experience.
Similar incarnation. Oh, that's good. All right, that's funny.
I need to repent for that one later, but
no, it's fine.
I think the analogy is really good, though, because what I think we're seeing online is there is a lot of anger because they have been lied to about the game and the rules for a long time. And so I can see it, because I see myself in so many of these. I'm a little bit older now, but when I found Orthodoxy, I thought, so I've been lied to about everything. I've been lied to about my faith. I've been lied to about the history of my faith. The Americans have such terrible grasp on history. And a lot of that has to do with, the abomination that is public education in a lot of ways. And
confirm.
Yeah. And also, some of that just being a younger country that has gotten drunk off of this mindset that we're exceptional and there's nobody like us, but we don't have to learn about the rest of the world. And so I think part of the reason they are so fervent and they are so up in arms is because they want to play a game. They want to be part of this world and this community, and they don't even know where to start. And all the rules that they were taught are mostly completely incorrect. And they're understandably upset. But for them, I think sobriety is I think that's something I've really learned through my journey into the faith is a lot of sobriety. And Americans do not like sobriety in any sense of the term. I mean,
that is true.
We don't. Fervor, drunkenness.
Sobriety is for the weak. It's for the weak.
Yes. Alcoholics built the Roman Empire.
God doesn't love a quitter. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
It's true.
That's my Irish side coming out.
No, you know what? As an American fault, and it can also be it can be sometimes a good thing, is that Americans they're like 0 to 11 in everything they do. Americans have no chill. That's really what it comes down to. Maybe Southerners have a little bit of chill, but for the thing with Americans, Eastern European will go to church and be like, yeah, be really serious about it, and then walk out, smoke a cigarette, and be like, I don't feel bad about it. It's chill. They'll drink some espresso. An American, goes to church for the first time and then buys the entire history of, and every word written by every church father, and memorizes every one of the councils, and it just, all like in 1 week, it's like no chill whatsoever. It's like, you guys just take it a little bit easy. Okay. It takes, it's one of those things where it's a lifetime journey, not a marathon sprint, and you see a lot of that in our kind of like, you have a recent convert that becomes a trad ortho influencer. It's like, you were literally doing pornography like 6 months ago, lady. You know what I mean? Right. And now you're lecturing people on YouTube about the church fathers. It's like, maybe we take some tiny steps there before we get to that point. Like, we love you, we welcome you, but tiny steps. Okay. But it's really, that is a very American kind of mindset, and you see it in everything. It's like,
speaking as like probably one of the most American people, the Americans need to get tempered with wisdom, and it's the kind of wisdom that can only come with age. Like, Karis, you're right. It's a young country. It is. We're still acting like teenagers in a lot of ways. And one of the fun things for me getting into this, and especially with students and school this year, it's that 0 to 11, but tempered with enough wisdom so you can sustain it. That's when Americans get really scary. That it's like, because I've started this year, and I'm running into students that I knew last year, and I'm picking up where we left off. I'm like, hey guys, so. And they're just diving into something new, and they're like, "Chew, do you ever settle down?" And nope. And they're like, "All right, let's go." It's fun, but you guys are right. Americans are 0 to 11, and maybe the trick is just, how do we temper that age?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? How do we temper that age?
Well, interesting that we're talking about Americans, because on your Substack, Karis, your most recent couple of essays have been about the history of Protestantism in America. And the big kind of, I would say, and let me see if I can phrase it properly for listeners and for everybody. When we've heard it a million times, America is a Christian nation. This nation was founded on Christian ideals and beliefs, et cetera, et cetera. And, we've all heard that it's a repeated refrain of conservative normie cons all over the place, right? And in your essays, you disagree with that, and I disagree with that also, because
same here.
It's very interesting. So want to tell us a little bit about the kind of the thesis behind those ideas?
Sure. Yeah. What's funny is that what put me on that journey was reading Father Seraphim Rose's Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. And, he was also American and a convert. And he would drop these few sentences or phrases, and he would say something like, democracy is a Masonic ideology. And I think, this is wild. And I tend to be somebody who, when I encounter a really intense claim, I have to investigate it for myself. And I just started doing rudimentary research, and I had a pretty strong grasp already. I mean, my bachelor's was in religion, and I had to do tons of sets of work on religion in America and the history of it. But I noticed I was going back through a lot of my textbooks and some of even my old reading. People weren't mentioning things like Freemasons. I thought, well, that's odd. Because I'm seeing primary sources here that refute that. I'm reading George Washington's letters where he directly talks about this. I'm reading works from founders of Ivy League universities who are mentioning Kabbalah by name. So, I get, when I feel like there's a mystery to be solved, I have to go after it. And, maybe like an ortho bro, I thought, I've been lied to. I'm going to figure out what's going on, and I'm going to expose it. And I just was incredibly shocked by how openly, it's like someone had described it to me as it's an open door that just a lot of people don't go down, particularly because of the way history is taught to us growing up in school. We're told America is a Protestant nation, or America is a Christian nation. We're founded on Christian ideals. And there's still a lot of Christians who make that argument and say it's based on natural law and the classical Western ideals. But a lot of those people don't understand pagan religion. They don't understand, a lot of people don't understand that the Greeks and the Romans were religious, but their religiosity looked very different than our modern American do. And when I started realizing really the overlap between so much of pagan practices and occultism, that's when I realized, oh, wow, it has been kind of in front of us how much pagan and occult influences have been right there on our country. But I think a lot of people didn't understand that because they didn't understand pagan religion. And they only had a version of Christianity that is really from a predominantly, maybe in the South, you'll get kind of a more Baptist view of the history of religion in the country. And in the North, you tend to get more of a Reformed Presbyterian bent to it. But even they don't really, I don't think they read the primary sources of their founding figures who were, as I try to show in my essays, they were reading Kabbalah, they were reading Rosicrucians, they were interested in numerology, astrology, and that thread has only intensified through American history.
Right. And a lot of Americans, because of our poor history departments when it comes to pre-college education, even really college education in most places, when you look at it from a Christian perspective, and I mean in a Protestant American perspective, you're looking through, and I'm sorry, my Protestant friends, you're looking through an incomplete Christian perspective, right? And we never talk. We all we all know the story of Thanksgiving. We know the fake story of Thanksgiving, but we understand Plymouth Plantation. I mean, is it Plymouth Rock and the Puritans, but we never really go deep into like, okay, so what exactly is a Puritan? They're not just like really, really serious Christians. No, there's actually a lot more to that. Okay. And when you start looking into who the Puritans were and who else came on the ships with them and who were some of the early, like, the early fathers of the United States, you're like, that's very interesting. And what's funny about that is that Christopher Hitchens used to go on and on and on about Thomas Jefferson specifically. And he used to just say, Thomas Jefferson was not a Christian, right? And Christopher Hitchens was absolutely right about that.
Yep.
Thomas Jefferson, who super conservative Christians love on a political aspect, the guy rewrote the New Testament, taking out every single divine act of Christ out of it. All right. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's not something a Christian would do, denying the divinity of Christ. And
yeah, it's kind of our thing. Yeah, kind of, I mean, it's kind of our, and that's what a lot, some of the conversations you're seeing now about re-enchantment, and I think why people are becoming more and more drawn to orthodoxy is because we fundamentally say no, right? That God's energy suffuses this entire world, and there is a magic to this world, and we experience that when we partake of the Eucharist, right, at divine liturgy. And so it's a fundamental rejection of that kind of materialist mindset that Thomas Jefferson was just enamored with.
Right. And, the deist, there are, they believed in a mechanistic universe, a universe that was really a machine, a clockwork God, that everything happened, the clockmaker God that basically created the universe and let it happen. That was kind of their outlook. It was very materialistic and, like I said, the very mechanistic kind of viewpoint. And from there, you can basically, walk your way all the way to modernity in the contemporary thought. And we've replaced the deist in our world with, we've replaced the clockmaker with AI, basically, right? Because when a tech bro says something along the lines of like, well, the universe is indistinguishable from a simulation, right? Well, you are no different than a deist. The clockwork concept, the machine, the gear concept was really just their contemporary way of looking at things. Our contemporary way of looking at things is this AI simulation, but ultimately it is a materialistic view of the world where, little levers move here and there, whether they're digital, quantum kind of computing, or they're gears in a clockwork machine. They're ultimately the same kind of concept of a mechanistic universe. And ultimately, that truly is a pagan way of looking at the world, or at least that's like what the true neo-pagans are. We've had a lot of conversation about paganism and this revival, this re-enchantment, right? And I think it's right. I think all the people talking about re-enchantment are correct. There is a deep spiritual need in the modern world that where we've turned around, we have tried the completely materialistic viewpoint and it has fallen short. It has not given any good explanations for things like love and hatred and pain and suffering or anything like that. And it hasn't, we have not materialized the Star Trek Next Generation viewpoint of the world. It just did not happen. And instead, we have this kind of mishmash of re-enchantment. I know, like, what's his name? Rod Dreher wrote a book about it, and Peterson, Dr. Peterson, wrote his book about it. And there's all these views about it, and they're all correct. They're all absolutely correct. But I think that while it's a very good thing, it can also be a very dangerous thing, because we can risk awakening gods that shouldn't be awakened, or adopting ideas that are, really iffy ideas. And on Substack, we've had this pagan conversation for the last few weeks, and it's been kind of, I kind of jumped into it. I ortho broed myself into it, and I really did. I'm sorry, guys. But the reason I did so is because I think it's somewhat important, right? And ultimately, what I realized in the last few weeks is that talking to these guys that are like Norse recreationists or like Germanic pagans, what they really are, they're just white supremacists that need a religious excuse for their white supremacy. That's really what they are. But those guys don't really matter. Those people are a 0.001% of the pagan population, right? But there are real pagans out there, and there are actually people like Elon Musk. All right. Those are the really scary pagans that as Christians we should really be addressing, because transhumanism matters, all right, in our world, because there are powerful people that truly believe that they can transcend, the material life we live through technology, right? That's true to these people, right? And they will do grotesque and evil things to themselves and to others, right? The transgender movement is ultimately a pagan movement because it is a religious belief that you can physically transcend your sexual nature that you were born with, your physical body, right? That's a pagan idea, whether those guys know it or not. It's no different than some of the transformations that they believed in back in ancient times, and a lot of the ideas. I mean, a lot of the things that people believe, people say, oh yeah, there's a lot of pagans in the US. I'm like, yeah, there are a lot of pagans, but I guarantee you 99% of them are girls doing astrology and tarot cards. Those are the real pagans, not some dorks that wear sky symbols on their t-shirts, and
well, it isn't even that. I want to just interject real quick. It's not just that, but it's pagans who they just watch Netflix all day.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. Or they're scrolling their phone all day. Or they're playing a computer game all day. It's crazy. The first week of school, we try to get to know students. And my colleague, he has a student that scrolls 18 hours a day.
Oh my God.
What? And like looked at the phone and looked at the time and looked at that stuff. And it's just like, you're just mainlining dopamine for 18 hours a day. You're going to be fried. Like that, it's that kind. I love how you're talking about this, Alex, because it's explaining that it's saying that it's just that there's Christianity and then not Christianity. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only distinction that really matters at the end of the day.
Right.
And then it's different flavors and different sizes. But yeah, you're right. The pagan thing, tiny, small, okay, whatever. That doesn't matter. It's this Borg-like, Matrix-like plugin that everybody's getting into, which is run by guys like Musk. You don't think he likes the idea of somebody scrolling 18 hours a day on X? That's how he sells ads.
Right.
Kidding? Let's go. You'd like all of us,
of course,
literally plugged in with our heads doing that shit. So
I mean, what
right,
are you doing? What are you doing when you're scrolling? You're basically sacrificing your time in your life towards the electrical gods of the internet, basically, right? Now, I'm not one of those guys that believes that AI is a demonic or anything like that, right? AI is a vessel, right? AI is a vessel, right? And Dr. Zachary Porku, a previous guest, and he's a catechist for the Orthodox Church in California. Outstanding guy. If you've never read his stuff, I highly recommend it. On his recent podcast, he said something that I thought was brilliant, right? He said, no, AI is not demonic, right? Because AI is just, it's really just a marble game. It's a computer. It's a really complex search engine that basically it's a machine itself. It doesn't think. It doesn't do anything. It is just programmed to answer questions based on a wide variety of answers that it possesses. That's where its power. But what AI has become for a lot of people is it's become an idol. And we look back and we're like, what is an idol, right? An idol is something that the pagans of the past, it was a box, it was a container, right? Whether it was a statue, like the Venus of Delsendorf, or the statues that of the Roman emperors that the Romans built, or any of the statues or altars that pagans built. And people say, why did Christians deface these statues in the past? Well, because those statues literally held the gods of the people that were torturing them, right? It wasn't they were just a statue; they were literally vessels for the spirits of these demons or these entities, right? And AI itself can become this vessel. It can become this idol, right? And you spend like 10 minutes online and you come across people that are dating their AI. They love their AI. They have, they've imbued like, a kind of egregore into this machine, right? Into this vessel of their personality. And I mean, that's what it does, right? It takes everything and it spits it back out at you, right? And you offer it, electricity and water, because it built, it destroys like the ecosystem through its and people are using AI like an oracle in the same way the Greeks would go to Delphi. Karis, you mentioned Father Seraphim Rose, right? And for our if you're an Orthodox if you're an Orthodox Christian, like Kentucky Squirrel in the chat and everything, you've obviously heard of Father Seraphim Rose. If you've listened to some of the Ortho Bros, you're all familiar with Father Seraphim Rose. He has reposed to the Lord a while ago, back in like the 80s, I believe, the year I was born, I think, or earlier. And but he was a Orthodox Christian from California, and he wrote this book, which is really a series of separate essays compiled together. And the book is called Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. And if you are inquiring and looking at the book, you're going to be like, oh, it's about orthodoxy, the religion of the future, right? Because the title is kind of misleading, I think, if you read it quickly. But it's really not about orthodoxy, the religion of the future. It's actually orthodoxy and the religion of the future. And what it talks about as the religion of the future, it talks about paganism, basically the religion of the Antichrist, and how it's taken over the United States and the world, but really how it's infiltrating its way into Orthodox Christianity, Roman Catholicism, the Protestant billion denominations. And it's a very fascinating book. And I will give a warning, okay? I will give my Orthodox Christian for a long time warning. It is not an easy book. It is definitely, if you're inquiring into orthodoxy or are interested in theology and religion, maybe it's not the book you want to read first. Okay, it's definitely a book. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah. Okay. No, it's. I'm glad I didn't read it when I was first inquiring and when I was first a Christian. I think it takes some years, and it's very heavy. It's very heavy. It's very sobering, because reading it, I personally felt when I was reading it, oh wow, I'm very often and have often lived like a pagan and not even realized it.
Right, absolutely. It's a terrifying book, really. Okay,
it's a hard
I recently reread it, and kind of in preparation to talk to you about it. And it's been a while since I read it, and I got new stuff out of it completely. And I read it because of the pagan conversations, and I was like, oh, okay. I was being drawn into this stupidity, and I was falling for it, and I was misunderstanding what was going on. And that book kind of like gave me a kind of a cold bucket of water on my face, and I stepped back. But for you guys, I think it's a good book. It's definitely worth reading, but I would read it with if you're just getting into religion, if you're just becoming a Christian, if you're just entering the church, I would wait a little bit for this one, okay? Because it's a medium level book, okay? It's not like deep theology by any means, but it's definitely a little bit more advanced, and it can inadvertently lead you astray if you go down the wrong paths with it, I think, right? Not that I'm saying anything wrong about it. There's nothing wrong about it or anything like that, but it tends to tickle some Protestant mindset kind of stuff to it.
Yeah.
And you might, I would read it with the guidance of your spiritual father, basically, in my opinion. But I think we can paraphrase him.
I was looking at the table of contents, and I'm kind of like, this is like Orthodox Teddy K. This is great.
A little bit, yes and no. Yes and
Yes,
no, right?
I mean, for the joke, but yeah,
And
it
then-
seems like, man, this is intense. This guy ain't holding back.
Yeah, it's intense. Okay, so I will kind of explain it, and Karis, please step in and correct me if I'm wrong, if I missed anything. Correct, So basically, the thesis of the series of essays that Father Seraphim Rose talked about was that he was concerned, and once again, I'm going to preface this, he's writing in the 60s, and this is the amazing part of the book, right? He is writing in the 60s, and if you read this book in the 60s and 70s when it was first released, you'd probably be like, what is this guy on? He is just out there, but now in 2025, you're like, oh man, I can't believe, you just see the erudition and the insight and spiritual, the amazing spiritual insight that he had looking at this, these things that were happening in the United States at that time. And he could see where we are today, and, everything he predicts in that book has come to pass, and actually worse, you know what I mean? But what his kind of thesis of that book is that, the modern world has become paganized again, or re-paganized, or I don't know, maybe that's not the word for it, and it's been done directly and completely covertly at first. So it started as a very covert kind of way of doing it, and it is now accepted. A lot of things that Christians of the past would consider just downright heretical or downright, completely, pagan and unbelievable is taken as normal or everyday by even people that consider themselves to be conservative Christians, for example, right? And, one thing he really talks about Hinduism and the different, so for your listeners, if you're not familiar with Hinduism is not a religion. Okay. It's not a religion in the way, Christianity is a religion, right? The idea of Hinduism as a world religion is an invention of the British Empire, right? when they were basically, coming up with the idea that the academic study of religion, the British Academy at that time decided to kind of take a bunch of different local beliefs, local, spiritual leaders in India during the British Raj and stuff, and kind of combine it, and they put it under the umbrella of Hinduism, right? Mm-hmm. But Hinduism is not like this solid thing where you can go find a book that tells you everything a Hindu believes. Right. It's not how it works. It's very local. There's very many different gods, and there's a lot of different practices and different levels. And it's very much based on usually one individual teacher. So it's a complex mixed mash of like local beliefs, superstitions, practices, all kind of. The idea of Hindu is really a Western idea superimposed upon a non-Western kind of cornucopia of things, right?
Yes.
But yes. Right, does that make sense, Karis? Am I right? Because
no, you're right, and I would say it's much more akin to the type of religion that would have been practiced across the ancient world in places like the Roman Empire, where people will pay homage maybe to a local god that they particularly worship and feel kinship to, but then they also have maybe gods in their family that their family pays homage to, and then there's gods of the state, maybe gods of the city, and all these gods have different practices, and there's different prayers, and it can completely depend on the region that you're in, right? And so yeah, it's you're exactly right that we've kind of superimposed the Western idea onto it for sure.
Right. Which is kind of like the joke where, the idea of Hinduism is very trendy in American culture. And I've known people that have studied, they study Hinduism and blah, 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 and they end up going to India and they're like, what? There's nothing, you know what I mean? Right. Like these guys are like, sacrificing rats to the rat god and all this stuff, and well, that's kind of what Father Seraphim Rose talks about. And in the 20th century, actually kind of in the 19th century, you tended to have the 19th century during the Romantic era, you had the kind of a rebirth of paganism, which was really a response to materialism, or the very materialistic aspect of modernity. And
Right.
the Romantic era, they wanted to return to this, like, you had your great, kind of pagan fantasy art, and your interest in Picts and that kind of stuff. This was during the era of archaeology, where archaeology first took off, right? And these guys were discovering the pyramids. And I'm not talking about discovering because everybody knew they were there, but like really studying, like Egyptology, right? I pointed out in a Substack post a while ago, and that I found completely interesting, is that if you go to one of the old cemeteries in Savannah, it's chock full of obelisks and ankhs and all kinds of like eyes of Horus and all kinds of really crazy Egypt, Isis statues and all sorts of Egyptian symbolism. And you're like, well, where does this come from? If you look at the dates, it's all from the late 19th century, which is Egyptology, and that whole thing was very big in the Victorian era. Even down here in the South, they were like really into it. If you're a wealthy person, you're into Egyptian gods, because they were they were discovering the mummies. They were starting to fully study the mummies and the ancient cities that are being discovered for the first time. South American pyramids were discovered around this time, and they started studying those. So there's huge kind of like a pagan revival that was mixed with archaeology and a little bit of Darwinism thrown in there. And the art world during that time also, it was an explosion of this kind of stuff, right? Specifically in up to World War I and right after World War I, you have a lot of Irish kind of fantasy stuff. You have Wagner that was very much into the whole Viking, Nordic kind of pagan thing going on. And a lot of this stuff kind of became part of popular culture. But around this time is when you started having Indians, right? Like Hindu mystics come to America. And this is really in the post-war period. And Father Seraphim Rose talks about this, where you had these guys and they came in and they were selling a atheistic version of Hindu spirituality. They were selling a very like open-ended kind of like, oh man, this is not a religion. This is like a way of life, And does it sound familiar to you guys? Because the Beatles were into it, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Sgt. Peppering all over the place, right? And these guys, it was during this era that California was chock full of these new cults and the Hare Krishnas and the transcendental meditation movement, which, for example, is still popular to this day, because you had, the director, David Lynch was a transcendental meditation. He was part of the TM movement. And these guys were, at one point, people were doing transcendental meditation in public schools, right? Yeah. But what they left out is that at the end of all this stuff, at the end of every transcendental meditation practice, it's always a practice, right? You end up in a room, praying to a mystical founder of this non-religion, you know what I mean? And you're making incense offerings to their spirit. And you're like, oh, okay, so I'm all of a sudden in a temple, right? I'm offering burnt offerings to a spirit.
You're doing puja. That's what you're doing. devote religious devotion, worship, sacrifice.
Right. And a lot of our mainstream, and specifically the Protestants and the Roman Catholics in the United States, they sat on their hands. They've sat on their hands through it. And Father Seraphim Rose, he even points out, some of them didn't just sit on their hands. Some of them joined into it. And a good example, and I know a lot of Roman Catholics are a big fan of this guy, and it's Father Thomas Merton, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, Fisto. He was
ringing a bell.
He's a Roman Catholic. He's deceased. He was a Roman Catholic monk, an American monk, and he wrote a lot of kind of spiritual meditations. A lot of it is really good, right? And but he was really deep into Buddhism, and he was an ecumenical guy. He wanted to combine Buddhist spiritual practice with Roman Catholicism and kind of a universalist religion. And he was bringing that into the Catholic Church. And you start having stuff where Christian churches are doing meditation hours, or they're doing, Christian yoga, right? But yoga itself is a religious yoga itself is a religious practice, right? So we live in the 21st century where you'll have an American say something, I'm not religious. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any of that. I'm a materialist, blah, 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 and who are the most materialistic people, or at least who claim to be the most materialistic people, right? And that's our Northern California, Silicon Valley people, right? They're materialistic to their core, right? They're your utilitarians, right? But then those same guys will go for yoga practice and they'll say namaste, which is a religious phrase very similar to how we say amen, or cross ourselves in an Orthodox church. And the guys teaching them yoga or teaching their meditation are mystics, right? But they're not religious guys, and it's interesting, right? It's terrifying because we have a generation of girls that are praying to crystals and doing ancient Buddhist or in Hindu rituals inside their houses, and basically doing ancient mystical practices that, if you're a Christian, you can only see them as harmful, or dangerous, as you're opening yourself up to nothingness and theologically wrong by any means from our perspective, right? But it's taken as normal, and it's just how it is, right? And Karis, I know that paganism is almost like it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere in our life, it's insidiously creeped its way into American and Western cultural life. Things that a Christian from 200 years ago would be like, what are you doing? Like, I'm like,
through Hollywood has really been one of those big conduits. And I'm a cinephile. I grew up on movies. I love movies, and realize, just studying a little bit of the history of Hollywood and then what people were doing in Southern California, and the overlap between, Aleister Crowley and, L. Ron Hubbard, and then, famous movie stars, and you really see, it's we're dealing with very, believe it or not, very ancient practices, but very dangerous practices for a reason. From a Christian perspective, there's a reason why for so long, the church sanctioned against those things, because it's not that they don't work. It's because they do work. And
right. And it's interesting that you bring up paganism in Hollywood, right? Because 2 episodes ago we actually discussed paganism in Hollywood, right? And during hanging out at church on Sunday, where we were just we always hang out for like hours and hours and hours, and our poor priest, he's just sitting there until 5 p.m. listening to us argue about theology, he just I just want to go home, guys. No, he loves it, right? He was telling us that if you look at church canons from back in the day, there used to be church canons that basically provided a stipend for former actors, right? Did you ever know this, Visto?
No, I did not notice.
So in a lot of European Orthodox churches, there was money that the church would basically had canons to give money to actors that converted, that became Orthodox, that became Christian, right? And they couldn't work as actors anymore. So they had the church had to provide for them, right? In the same way it provided for former prostitutes that came into the church, right? Like you can't be a prostitute anymore, guys. So but we're going to take care of you. We're not going to let you starve because you gave up your profession, right? And this is ancient stuff, right? This is from like the back in the day, right? And it's interesting because the thinking behind it, right? Why actors were not allowed to go back to being actors, and they were not allowed to really they weren't allowed to become like actors and musicians were not allowed to become priests, was because an actor does not control his own body.
Right.
An actor does the will of others, right? An actor channels other things, right? And we don't think about it that way, right? But when you look back, if you study religion, and specific ancient religion, right? In pagan times, specifically like in Greek times, the shamans of that time, ancient religions, they were basically actors, right? They would put on their masks and they would put on their costumes and they would become the gods, right? They would let the spirits of these gods take over their body and they would act a certain way. And you see it repeated in ancient Greek pagan religions where the choir would speak with one voice,
right.
Or the actors, before they would perform a play, they would invoke the muses, right? It was going to see a play, going to see a performance was a religious experience in the ancient world.
Yep.
Right. And the actors were vessels for the spirits that were invoked, the lessons that were taught, right? And like I said in the previous episode, right? The cinema, the screen, right, was the religious temple of American paganism. It was a religious temple of the 20th century, just like an ancient temple, or just like a church, right? You would go and you sit for 2 hours in the dark, watching people invoke the muse, right? And they would teach you a lesson, right? They would teach you how to act in life. Whether you agreed with it or not, they're teaching you. Hollywood shaped our cultural landscape, right? Every one of our generation, our previous generations, and even our children, we've probably learned more morality or more how to live our lives from the movies we've watched than from, our parents or any of that stuff, right? But is it not a temple that we went to? Do we not go into a dark place where light's not used in the same way that a religious pagan ceremony took place, or even the liturgy, if you want to be honest, right? And yeah, it's there. It's dangerous, and it does absolutely affect our culture. And we do have and who makes these movies and who makes this art, it's important because humans are religious people. Right, we are a religious species. We're the only species on this planet that is religious, but it is at the core the thing that makes us human in a way. And we have to worship and we have to connect with the divine somehow. And if we're not going to do it the right way, we're going to do it some way or another.
Yeah, what you're making me think of? So you talked about Lynch earlier, so naturally I'm thinking of the Black Lodge and the way he focuses on electricity. And I think he identified something. The electricity really allowed this to occur because with your movie theater example, I mean, every week you go see the new sermon. You know what I mean? The new release is out. We're going to go see. And the blockbusters, those were just, I mean, every preacher and every pastor, they got certain, sermons that hit harder than others. Right. Well, same thing with Hollywood. And then beyond that, you guys are talking about paganism. You guys are talking about gods of the home and stuff like that. Now we have gods in our pockets. Just got to look at the little black mirror and look up your Netflix and look up your TikTok or whatever you want, and you can plug right into whatever it is it wants to show you that day. I mean, it's funny you're talking about transcendental meditation. I think about that kid that scrolls 18 hours a day. That's transcendental meditation in a way. You've just fried to the point where you're just simply open. You're simply open to whatever comes through. It's not even thinking about it. Whoa.
Well, you by
saying kill the internet, but anyway.
Right, but by bringing up electricity, you bring up a very interesting point, actually, right? Because there's once again, Dr. Porcu in his most recent podcast talks about this, right? He talks about how the ancient church fathers, the old church fathers, and when you read about descriptions of spirits and demons and that type of thing, right? They're usually described as air, right? As air, as a force. They have no bodies, but their bodies are made of air, right? And it's not a great leap of judgment to, to look at air as electricity in a way, right? As a force that is not a material force, but it's also a present force, right? That you can feel, it can manipulate, it can do things, right? So, we are talking about a spiritual thing, right? Our machines are run on a force that most of us can't explain, right? Your average Joe, you ask him off the street, like, how does electricity, how does your light switch work? And you're like, oh, magic, right?
Yeah.
It's no different, right? Like, people can't explain your basic, like, on-off circuit light switch, or let alone explain how the laptop we're using, or, hey, you want to really be crazy, how are we doing this? How are we talking live on the internet from Florida and South Carolina, and guys in Eastern Europe are listening to us speak live right now, right? That's wild, right? It's magic, guys. I mean, it has a material explanation, but the forces behind it are so complex that they would be considered like absolutely spiritual elements if you really want to break them down, especially once you get into like really high-end physics and quantum physics and that type of thing. We're re-entering a world of the supernatural is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Which is interesting because go ahead.
It's funny to me too because I like the thing that just popped into my mind. I mean, technology is creating its own religious superstition. If anyone's played the old 8-bit Nintendo system, and when a game didn't work, you blew into the cartridge and you smashed it up and down in there. At one point, I was only able to get one game to work, and it was if I wedged a Lego brick in there just right. So that was the only game I played for 6 months because any other game wouldn't work. But I figured out the secret incantation. I mean, this is basically Warhammer 40K. All right, that's essentially what we're talking about at this point. Like techno priests, and like we don't know how any of this works, but if you kick the tires in just a particular way, the machine spirit might oblige you. It's
right.
Like, oh shit,
we're in
trouble, guys.
I mean, during a baptism, the Orthodox priest breathes on you, and it's kind of an exorcism to get rid of demons, right? So maybe you're exercising the Nintendo cartridge.
Yeah, I'm exercising the Nintendo cartridge from all the.
I don't know, getting the techno demons out of it.
Yeah, getting the techno demons out of it. So I can
talk
play
about
Mario.
Talk about techno demons. The other part of Father Seraphim Rose's outstanding book, Karis, is the alien stuff. What do you think about the alien stuff?
Yep, the alien stuff. I mean, first of all, he really does his homework. I mean, he goes through the history of UFOs. So you very quickly realize this is a guy who knows what he's talking about. And I mean, at the end of the day, he basically says, okay, so aliens they're demons, and they're casting these delusions, and they're doing this successfully in the post-war period because we've all been spoon-fed this diet of science fiction that, and he's 100% right. You start looking into the background of famous science fiction authors going back to H.G. Wells, and these are guys who are reading occult esoterica. They are deeply interested in channeling other spirits. Some of them openly want to commune with demons, and others just want to, they're interested in the other world. They're interested in other realms. And so Americans are, after Americans and Westerners, after 50, almost 100 years of being inundated with images of UFOs and strange kind of like reptilian beings, what do you know? They start seeing those things in the 40s and in the 50s, and it becomes this essential part now of the American zeitgeist. And I see it online all the time. People want to talk about aliens, and I think his argument is 100% compelling and right, that it's just demonic delusion for people who have otherwise been raised in materialism, and that's the only form of like religious otherworld beings that they can conceive of.
Correct. And he points out that if you look at all the reports of encounters of the first kind, second kind, and he even breaks it down by different, using a ufologist kind of like scale of grading encounters, and you take out the science part, the skin of the science, like that it's wearing, you end up with situations that are nearly identical to patristic and stuff you can find in like the life of the saints when they encounter demons and demonic entities and demonic possession. It's almost the same exact thing, word for word, and a materialist atheist would say, oh, well, there were just aliens back then and those guys were just religiously deluded and didn't get it, right? But now the reality is it's the other way around. We are scientifically, materialistically deluded, and we're not seeing the demons for what they really are, demons. Which explains why an intelligent race of beings from a different planet would not be butt raping guys from Alabama, or Kansas, right? But a demon would.
No.
Yeah, and you say it like that, it's really laughable, and it's
but it's terrifying, because that's exactly who would be doing that, right? Or creating a situation where because it's not just we joke that those experiences are all like by crazy people, but there's been alien encounters by intelligent people, that pilots and military people, police officers, first responders all over the place, that we're not like your stereotypical low IQ mountain person or whatever. And even those people aren't really stereotypically stupid. It's just a progressive kind of stereotype on those places. But it's fascinating and interesting. And David Lynch believed in it. I mean, he probably didn't read Seraphim Rose. I mean, maybe he did, right? They're from the same place, interestingly enough, from Southern California. I mean, David Lynch is like from Minnesota or something. But
have we ever seen them together in the same room?
I think he died before David. He
Are we sure?
Father Seraphim Rose passed away right as David Lynch was becoming popular, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm just saying.
David Lynch was a young man when Father Seraphim Rose passed away. But I mean, that's what Twin Peaks is about, right? It's really about these aliens that are really
What have we opened up?
Right. And we've kind of explained it away using scientific terms and kind of like brushed it off in the same way we do a lot of things in the contemporary world. We come across an inconvenient kind of thing and we just come up with a material explanation, and we're like, oh, the person was drunk or something like that, or
hand wave it,
or we're just gonna hand wave this away, or I don't believe it. You get a lot of atheists that'll say something like, well, how come God doesn't create miracles anymore? But the truth is, you wouldn't believe them. Right? We have miracles every day. Miracles happen constantly. They probably happen around us. We've probably, I personally have seen, several things that are, people would consider supernatural or that kind of stuff, both in the deep jungles of Papua New Guinea, where I, direct with people that I'm pretty sure are still cannibals to this day and worship all kinds of terrifying demonic presences. And I've encountered some terrifying things, and I've had some, encounters with things like that here in the present. Fisto knows one of the stories I recently had, which had me calling my priest to come bless my house. And I might save that story for another time, but I was like, and he's like, yep, I'm coming over. And it involved Papua New Guinea stuff I brought from there.
Great story. You got to tell it sometime.
Yeah, I gotta tell that story sometimes, but it sounds silly when I say it, but then like I think about it, I'm like, oh, that's terrifying, But we ignore this stuff, In a way, Dostoevsky was right? If Christ came today, nobody would believe that he was Christ, and it'd probably kill him again, and that's the sad truth of our world.
They'd cancel him.
Right. Absolutely right.
Didn't even have to.
Dostoevsky called it out just honestly in the Great Inquisitor in the Brothers Karamazov, and we will deny the presence of the divine or the the evil presences and all this kind of stuff, and just ignore it. And no amount of tangible physical proof given to these people will make them believe at all. It's just because your eyes need to open. You need to open your own eyes, and these people refuse to do so. So there's almost no point, right?
Yeah, that's something on Substack. I don't know what you think, Karis, but in these conversations, my earlier rant when I was going off about it is because at the end of the day, there's no argument that's going to convince anybody. There's no discussion. There's no point that's going to bring somebody to go, oh, I've been wrong this whole time. No, it's just you're refusing to accept it. You just don't want it. You have no contrition. You have no humility. It's just I don't even want to hear it. Like there's just no. It's not that there isn't an argument that somehow, and how materialistic is that too? Like, oh, if I press the right amount of buttons on the keyboard, then I'm going to convince something of something. No, you're not. That's not going to happen. It's because people don't want to, so they won't. I mean, there you go.
Look at St. Paul, right? It took him being knocked off, his horse and literally blinded, right? We all think that we're smarter than the people of the ancient world. We know more now, and a lot of that is just it's the orthodoxy of the Enlightenment. We think we can explain everything via science, via materialism, and nothing is new under the sun. It's really not. And we are so hubristic that we think, oh, well, we can now explain everything. And so if something's real, if I can empirically explain to you that it's real, and that's fundamentally not true. And it's part of the reason that it's futile. It's really futile to argue with people about lots of those things, because you're right. They have to see it. They have to experience it themselves to really get it.
Right. And even if they experience it, sometimes they won't get it because in a way, just like Paul, he had to be struck blind in order for him to see, and some people just refuse to, they just, that's really it. It is the problem of free will. And, you can't do it until you're ready. You just can't do it, and it's like, it's some people are part of that religion. They're debunkers or whatever, and they have to debunk everything. And you're gonna have an argument with them. You have a discussion, and they're gonna run to Wikipedia and drop 30 facts. But now they're gonna run to ChatGTP or Grok, and they're gonna be like, oh, well, what does Grok have to say about that? That's Grok, if you still have a Twitter account.
Yes, Grok, is this true? Oh,
Grok, is this true?
Yeah.
Yes. That is the antithesis of shut up, retard.
Oracle of the internet, give us your judgment upon this truth. Or like final, like how crazy is that? When you take a step back and you look at that, you're like, you're basically looking for truth from a machine. It's just wild to me, but people are like, oh, there's no spirits, there's no pagan gods. No, you're literally letting a machine tell you what's true or what's not. Like you nut, you crazy person, you.
A machine that majority of its work is producing and highlighting pornography too, right? Like that's what you're going to, like the internet. It's like that's what does the internet produce? Not a lot of good things. So
And then people are shocked. Why is our world messed up? I'm like, no, it's, yeah, we live in a terrifying world. We live in a terrifying time, and there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good going on right now. Okay. There's a lot of good because
There
Yeah.
is.
this spiritual reawakening we're experiencing, right? Where the materialist worldview is falling apart because it's failed to deliver, right? That's what it comes down to ultimately, is that, like, we're starting to see past the Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing
It
past the
sucks.
curtain, and there's nothing there. It's just nonsense, or there's actually something there, and there's a lot of something there. And so it's a good thing because it's bringing a lot of people. It's bringing our ortho bros, and it's bringing people. And people joke around about the ortho bros, but I'm happy that they're there, and I'm happy that they're doing their thing. The reality of it is, our church, and I'm sure your church too, Karis, it's very filled with families. Right, the majority of new people coming into it are people in their 30s with children in tow, and it's wonderful. And God willing, it keeps on happening. And I pray that it does, and I pray that it continues. And I want all our churches to be like in panic mode because we don't have enough places for all the people that are showing up. Right.
The best
And-
problem to have.
Right. That is, it's a great problem to have, but of course that poses challenges because, with that, you have people that might be a little bit too zealous off the start, or unprepared to handle some of the mysteries and that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's our job as people that have been around for a while to take on this task. And it means that we have to be much more involved. The days of, your Greek Orthodox, cradle Orthodox person that just brings baklava to church on Sunday, and maybe it's time for those people to step up and realize that you have to bring in these new people,
Yeah.
because the truth is, and I said this to a guy at our church, right? He said, like, oh, we need to like go do more outreach. I go, no, we can't do more outreach, my friend. And the reason we can't do it is because the outreach is going on right now in our church, right? Where the majority of our church is probably people that have converted to Orthodoxy in the last 5 or 6 years. They're still learning, right? The Orthodox Church in the United States is still in a mission mode. I don't know what people might disagree with me, but to me, it looks like that, right? Because growing up, Karis, right? Growing up, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I never met anybody that was Orthodox. I never met one person, right? Not counting the occasional Greek. There's a big Greek cathedral like down the street from my house, right? But it was all a bunch of Greeks that have been Greeks, and they were born Orthodox, and that's it, right? But I never met an American that went into Orthodoxy, right? It was very rare. And now in the last 5 years, I have people coming up to me at work, and they're like, so, hey, I heard you go to Orthodox church. I heard about that. It's pretty cool, man. And like, I met another guy like before I moved here, and he converted to Orthodoxy, right? I had this exact conversation like 2 days ago, and 20 years ago when I was in high school or college, and I never would have had that conversation, so yeah, it's growing fast, and we have to step up and like do our job to get people away. And we have to make sure that we channel this re-enchantment into the right direction, because we don't need these people falling deeper and deeper into spiritual dead ends or dangerous spiritual practices like the next step beyond yoga, or the next step into you're worshiping Odin at the Skyrim convention, and the next year you're sacrificing baby to a tree, and it's
it's a slippery slope. You go to a party, and people don't realize how quickly, especially too, now that psychedelics are really reemerging onto the scene, and that's becoming so prolific, people don't realize how quickly things can get hairy real fast. So
right. Yeah. You're having a good day. You go out with your buddies from the Bitcoin Corporation company or whatever you work at, and you get one shotted by some Mayan demon because you took some mushrooms and stuff, and it's true, and psychedelics were a key part in the San Francisco and the Southern California movement, and that's where a lot of this paganism stuff comes from. And it goes, if you read the stuff about the NASA jet oh my gosh, the jet. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I wrote about that in
JPL, right? And those
Yeah.
guys were all straight up Crowley-eyed, Satanists and
sex rituals and
right. Yeah, there were sex witches, and there were doing sex magic and bringing on Babylon and all kinds of interesting stuff in Southern California. Matter of fact, I actually the JPL guys that were into that kind of stuff, I went by the place where they actually did those rituals, and it was actually in Newport Beach, California, right on PCH, right?
Man, what is wrong with Southern California? What is wrong with that place?
Well, I've said it before that there must be some kind of ancient demon underneath the ground in Los Angeles, because nothing good ever comes out of that.
Definitely, it's like the final boss over there.
Yeah, its head is definitely in Mulholland Drive. It's the spirit of that land is not good whatsoever. But you have all kinds of Charles Manson, and the songwriter is all there. All that stuff is straight up out of there, and that kind of stuff is interesting. We have to be careful, because our priest, for example, he was joking. He did a house blessing for you guys that are not Orthodox. I don't know if Roman Catholics do this, but when you move into a house or you buy a house, it's customary to invite your priest over, and you do a blessing. He does a blessing of the house, right? And he brought holy water and icons, and we walked around their house, and he sprinkled holy water, and it was like a little liturgy kind of that we did, and it was very, very interesting. And we afterwards we were talking a lot about it, and because actually before we were talking about it, and it was like, I was like, so like, do you see a lot of weird stuff in people's houses? And he goes, he's like, the one thing I see a lot of is I see a lot of pagan stuff. A lot of people will say, oh, I'm like a diehard Christian, and you go into their their bedroom, and they've got a statue of the Buddha, and they've got like little, the little hand with the eye thing, and mandalas and stuff, and all kinds of items that are spiritual symbols, and that person, the same person, would be like, oh, you get these atheists are like, oh, I'll never wear a cross, or I'll never like have a cross in my house. Or it's Christian superstition, right? But then they'll straight up put like a third eye of some Buddhist or Hindu god that demands blood sacrifice, right? And people are like, oh yeah, Hinduism is such a peaceful, beautiful religion. I'm like, literally, these guys worship Shiva, and she's got she's holding, severed heads, and there's blood coming out of her fangs, right?
You have not read the Bhagavad Gita,
right? And you guys do weird sex magic and stuff, right? But
Grok, is true?
Huh?
Just kidding.
Grok is true.
Gotta go ask Grok.
If you really want to read a terrifying horror novel by Dan Simmons, right? Dan Simmons wrote my favorite science fiction novel, Hyperion, but he writes mostly horror now. He wrote this terrifying horror novel called Song of Kali, which is about these kind of like liberal professor types, and they go to India, and their baby gets basically kidnapped by like this Kali Yuga cult, and it's a terrifying thing. And this cult is a real cult that that exists, and they murder people. It's part of their religion to murder people, and yeah, it's not very cool, guys. Don't cover your bedroom.
Did you ever read Donna Tartt's The Secret History?
Absolutely. I love that book.
Yeah, that similar, like, we're just gonna play around with this and see what happens. And
yeah,
it's sex and murder usually.
Yeah, they're playing around with ancient Greek paganism, right? If you guys have never read the fantastic book, I know in the chat we got librarian of Solano here, and he wrote a big piece on Donna Tartt's Secret History. But these guys they were studying classics. They were going to a kind of a super hippie, kind of a hipster college in the East Coast, which is actually based on the college that she went to, that Donna Tartt went to. It was a Roman Catholic, by the way. But they were all into, studying classics, and they would, they had this little club, and they would only speak in, Greek, and they would read, first sources and stuff. And they decided to basically invoke the Furies. And they got kind of retarded into it. And then, they ended up killing somebody, and it's very much implied that they had sex with his corpse and ate him. I don't know if you caught that implication in the book. But yeah, because they took it too far, because it's there, man. It's real, right? Like a lot of the biggest misunderstanding that a lot of people that come at me against, like, the people like the pagan types that go, oh, you don't believe in this stuff. I'm like, no, dude, I absolutely believe in this stuff. I know that what you claim to believe in is absolutely real. That's why I can't be cool with you, my friend. Okay. Right? Because I had somebody criticize me the other day going, Alex, how come you don't want to you want to engage with these people because they share the similar goals? I go, no. We don't share the similar goals, my friend. Right? My goal is the kingdom of God, right? The kingdom of heaven, right? These people who are even LARPing as pagans, right? They're dancing down the path of damnation, right? Like, I don't care that they're conservative and they believe in nationalism or any of that stuff, right? Nationalism with paganism is damnation. Yeah. So we don't share the same goal, guys. You know what I mean? Right. Like, you can't accept that. You cannot be a Christian and go, yeah, I'm okay with the guy that's burning incense to an ancient god that Christ annihilated. I'm sorry.
Saying something like that just completely betrays how little you actually know of what we think. You don't even have the slightest clue what our goals are.
Right.
Or what we want, or what we're looking to do, or what it is we're trying to accomplish. You've got no freaking clue. Right. And it's not even that. Like, you can't even, your horizon is not far enough, not even remotely far enough.
Right.
You're worried about the next election.
Well, exactly. And the reason is
whatever.
But their non-belief and belief is actually as intended, right?
Yes.
Because the whole point is these powers, right? These powers of the earth, these powers of air, right? They want us not to believe in them, right? By being a dorky neo-pagan who goes to, like, the Ren Fair with your, like, medieval, like, robe on, and your wizard hat or whatever, right? You are doing the bidding of these people by being a clown, right? Of these powers, basically, because you're making it look silly and harmless, right? And by making it silly and harmless, you're making it mundane. By making it mundane, now you have women, praying to crystals. Because that's not religion. It's just spirituality, guys. Like, yeah, I might be going through ancient Vedic rites, putting my body into religious poses intended to allow myself to be possessed by the spirits. But no, it's just like, it makes me feel good, guys. I'm just stretching. Do you see what I mean? Right? Like, the stupidity of it is part of the plan. They're just stooges of powers beyond their comprehension. You know what I mean? And it's crazy when you look at it this way. They're basically the tail's end of the Crystal Girl coin, right? By making it silly and stupid, they're making it mundane. By making it mundane, they're allowing it to get through the ranks. And us Christians are allowing it because we're like, oh, it's no big deal. She's just praying, she's just doing yoga. She's just stretching, guys. No, she's not stretching. She's literally going through the prostrations to an ancient god.
Yeah.
But anyways, we lost all our listeners. Listen, guys, me and Karis were to use the parlance of the internet, we are seraphim rose pilled. Okay.
Look,
it's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, I practiced yoga for years, and I was never, like, religiously into it, to my knowledge, but when I started reading him, I was like, oh gosh, he's right. And I mean, there's so many things like that in our everyday lives and in society. And it takes, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of experience, takes a lot of reading. And yeah, I mean, I would like, if people want to know, it's like, I think reading the lives of the saints is such a huge learning curve for people, because you can really see how so many of the saints who built the church, they had to deal with a lot of these demons head on, and did so very successfully in that they converted entire nations of people. So yeah, this is part of being a human on earth, and we have to deal with these things, and better to be equipped.
Right. All right, Karis, coming to the end. Before we call it a night, I want all the listeners to read your outstanding essays on Substack. All right. I want you, hopefully you're going to keep writing.
Yes.
I look forward to reading everything you have. Do you recommend any books, for example? Is there any books, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, that you would recommend our readers take a look at?
Oh, such a good question. I will say books for people. I am currently working on my book club. We're reading The Unintended Reformation. And for people who want to understand where your Western mindset comes from, I highly recommend that. That's by Brad S. Gregory, and he's a wonderful early modernity scholar. That's kind of I also just read an incredible book called American Nations by Colin Woodard that I think is really important reading for people, especially now in the current, I feel like there's some deconstruction of American identity that's happening now for a lot of people. And that really helps explain a lot of where the different national cultures of this country come from, and that we aren't as unified as we've been taught to believe. Kind of another convenient lie we've been told. And then for people who are interested in orthodoxy, I can't recommend more The Mountain of Silence, especially for people who have dabbled or been interested before in Eastern religions or neo-paganism or just, quote unquote spirituality. And they're understandably not satisfied with American Protestantism. The Mountain of Silence is an incredible book that really shows what Orthodox spirituality looks like. And it's based on incredible work by a sociologist who went to Mount Athos. So I can't recommend that more.
Fascinating. I've only read one of the three you've mentioned, and that was I've read American Nations. It's a fascinating book. For you guys, you might be familiar with some of the ideas in the book, and it's the idea that the United States was formed and shaped by the different waves of immigration from Europe, and how the Midwestern Scots-Irish, or really the Germanic, basically, like immigrant groups, are very different than the New Englander groups. And it kind of explains where some of the local cultures come from and how that shapes the greater whole, right? And it's it's a fascinating book, and I know a lot of our listeners are familiar with that book itself. But the Mountains of Silence,
Alex. Sorry, can you make sure just to link all these in the post for today?
Yes, I will. This time, because I got my yellow pad, instead of like how I usually do.
Hey, all right.
Right.
Love the yellow pad.
Yeah, I went and ordered like 50 yellow pads. My wife got them for me from Amazon, and they're like the ideal podcasting. So I actually just wrote all those down. You said you're a movie person. Any recent movies you've liked or watched?
Oh God, I mean, movies have been awful for several years. It's actually in some way helped to get rid of some of my movie addiction. But and I have started doing some movie reviews on my Substack as well, of mostly period pieces. Anything I've seen recently, it's mostly been pretty terrible for the most part. I did see Sinners, and that was okay. It was basically like From Dusk Till Dawn, Southern 21st century version. But if people want a movie I watched several years ago that a lot of people have criminally not seen, and that I would highly recommend, especially in today's climate, is a fantastic film from '93, Daniel Day-Lewis, In the Name of the Father. I cannot recommend this movie more. This is an amazing movie. It was nominated for a lot of Oscars, fully, duly, and it's about wrongfully imprisoned, based on a true story, wrongfully imprisoned Irish man who was accused of being an IRA bomber. And it's very apropos of a lot of the conversations right now regarding Israel and Palestine.
Interesting. Okay. I love Daniel Day-Lewis, though. I think he's one of my favorite movies of all time. There Will Be Blood.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I think that might be the best movie of the 21st century. Yeah. Oh, sorry. My dogs are fighting.
I know it will.
Uh-oh.
I was waiting for that. They're telling me that the podcast is over. They're like, come on, turn it off.
We take us for a walk.
Yeah. It's raining outside, so they're not getting a walk. Sorry, guys. All right, Karis, thank you so much for joining us. That was a wonderful conversation. You're always welcome to come back on.
Yeah, good time. Thank you.
Inviting you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
Yeah, and I hope we when I have people like you coming on who are just so intellectual and well spoken and well written, your writing's so fantastic. I'm always like, oh man, I really hope I asked good questions, and then I go off on tangents, and then what I do, I go off on tangents, and I'm talking about techno demonic movie gods. But I mean, yeah, that's what we do here at the Black Ibis. We just kind of talk about crazy stuff. But for all you listeners, thank you very much. We're glad to be back. We enjoyed our week off. I missed you guys. It was a long week. It felt like I haven't, nobody's called me gay or a volcano demon worshiper or anything in a while. I feel like I've been neglecting my haters and my fans. For all of you guys, please like, share, and subscribe this episode. This will be edited. For you guys listening live, thank you for listening live. I really appreciate it. But for the rest of you guys, that you're going to be listening to the edited version that's cleaned up, and I'm going to get rid of that opening where I completely blew it when it came to starting the streams. This stream was kind of because Substack is not very stream friendly, but it's working there. We're getting there with the Substack streaming. And please subscribe to our paid subscription model. It helps me and Fisto keep this going. It helps us pay for better equipment, better, it justifies our existence in a way, because we always, we're doing this for fun and we love doing it. And it's always going to, these episodes are always going to be free, but we do have those paid episodes that are kind of extras, and they're more of a thank you than an actual true product there. Thank you for all you guys helping us out. And Karis, thank you once again for coming on. Listeners, please go read her stuff. It is fascinating. I really, really, really recommend her series on American paganism and the occult roots of American Protestantism. It's fascinating, and it's some of you guys might take issue to it because you're wedded to the idea of a Christian nation from the early on, but there's lots of evidence that is not so. And you can look at Washington, D.C. and its Freemason architecture. You can look at the dollar bill, guys. Come on, I don't have to be a conspiracy
theorist. Constitution.
Right,
it's a
right.
constitutional republic, and they don't mention God or Christ or any of that in the whole thing.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
Not the God we worship.
You got to deal with that, guys.
Right. We got to accept that. We got to accept that. Right.
Come on.
And for the rest of you guys need to go to church if you're going to listen to us, because we're going to, it's funny because we never really talked about, religion at all the early episodes, but we just kind of rolled into it. And I don't think it's because it's popular. I don't think we're doing it because it's popular. We're doing it because, one, it's interesting, and that's what we're interested in. But we're also talking about it because it is urgent. It is urgent and necessary. Okay.
Mhm.
There's a reason why, Karis is writing. There's a reason why we're talking about this. It's because we all, we deep down inside us, we know it's true. And we know that there is something wrong with the contemporary world. All right. I don't have to be a scholar and an academic or a scientist or whatever to tell you this. Okay. We all know it, right? All of us know it. So that's why we're talking about this kind of stuff, because it's critical. All right. All right, guys.
Yes.
Good night. We'll see you next week. Same time. Actually, I think we're going to do Tuesday next week because my schedule is different this time. So probably Tuesday next week, we're going to do another live stream. I think it's going to be just me and you, Fisto. I just want to catch up.
Nice.
What do you think? We're going to catch up episodes, right?
That sounds
So for
great.
you listeners,
sorry, go ahead. I'll have a couple weeks of school under the belt. And,
right, that's what I want to
start
hear about. I want to hear about your school, your new school year, and I've got some ideas to talk about, and it's just going to be us, right? And then we're going to start booking guests for the rest of the year, and then we're getting near the end of the second season. Can you believe that? Like, we've been doing this forever now. We might be like one of the oldest podcasts on Substack.
I think we were the first podcast on Substack.
Yeah, we were like one of the first podcasts on Substack.
Yeah. No. I think the first one, at least that's my personal headcanon, is that we were the first one. So I'm
well, you know what? There was a lot of podcasts that came to Substack, but we might have been one of the first podcast, like Substack only podcasts.
Yeah, no, certainly the first non-faking gay one.
Well, yeah, and
that's 100%. That's 100%.
the best, the
right,
most
absolutely.
real, right?
The most based, the best, the greatest,
the most based, the most real,
part,
the most listened to, the best fans,
the most humble podcast I think there is.
The most, the handsomest hosts, and the handsomest,
the most calmly hosts, also the most humble and satisfied and quiet,
not
very
rude,
kind. No, we're never rude to anybody ever. It's really amazing. It's really amazing the amount of self-control that I demonstrate on a daily basis on Substack. Yeah. Everybody knows it.
The most technologically savvy, like it only took us to halfway through season 2 to figure out how gain works on a microphone. You're like, oh, what?
And I don't even use that microphone anymore.
I know. It's like, how does gain work on it? Oh, that's what this does.
Yeah. A headset I've owned for years. Oh, it actually does work with my microphone. Amazing.
Yeah, we're high tech here. No, we've rejected the techno demons of technology, guys. Okay, we're just based.
Just real quick, because I actually have a storm rolling in, so you guys are going to lose me here probably in the next 5 minutes. But can you believe somebody accused me of using AI in a post when I'm sitting here I don't even own a camera. I don't even know how my microphone works. I'm like, I could type 90 words a minute. That's about the best I got. All right. That's the only technological edge I have on anybody. Yeah, sure, dude. AI. Yep. 100%. Absolutely. I did.
All right, guys. Good night. Like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you follow Karis on Substack.
Yes,
I'll have the links for all the books and her Substack. And once again, thank you and good night.
Thank you.